Hi, I'm Catherine from She Who the River Could Not Hold, and welcome to my 1,000 follower celebration. In this tutorial, I'm going to be going over how I make my gift sets. So today, we're going to make one for Stranger Things, the survey winner of this category. Let's get started. There are definitely a lot of ways to get the clips that you're going to use. While I'm fairly certain having the actual downloaded movie, show, or clip makes for higher quality, I don't particularly have the desire to go out and download them. So for me, I primarily use Netflix, since all of my main shows are on there, and YouTube. When screen recording, I found the easiest way to keep your file size down, and to prevent Netflix from realizing what you're doing, is to shrink your window down to about as thin as the viewer will let you. Then I use QuickTime to take a quick screen recording of the clip that I want. Picking what clips you want to use can vary from super strategic or kind of random. For me, I like to just look for a couple of elements. I love cinematography, so I like to look for shots that are more than just straight-on headshots, though those can be beautiful too. Of course, important characters to the episode or the gift set's theme. I like to not just use faces if I can help it, so I'll try to find a detail shot that include objects, scenery, faceless shots, or group shots. I also think ahead to the exporting process, where the file size is heavily affected by the amount of pixels that move per frame. For that reason, and for personal taste, I like to aim for GIFs that have minimal movement in them. So not only do they look cool, but they're easier to export. I won't pass up a good action shot though if I can help it though, so it's a lot of balance. For this gift set, it's an overall show one. I stick to my general rules though and still aim to get a good variety of shots that felt like they captured the important themes and aspects of the show. I aimed for at least one or two from each season, and then picked storylines and characters that fit it. Once you have everything selected, it's time to edit. Once I've opened up Photoshop, I drag and drop all of the video files directly into it. This will auto-generate a video timeline at the bottom of the screen. The first thing I like to do is to trim the clip into what I want the GIF to be. While screen recording, I made sure to have extra time before and after what I want to GIF, so I have flexibility in trimming it. Trimming the clip can come down to a handful of things: the action of the shot, movement, or just in general how long you want to go. I found most clips and shows last about 2 to 3 seconds, so I don't actually adjust too far from that. Usually I leave the speed at its natural one, since speeding up or slowing down GIFs can make them look a little wonky. If I do feel like once I trim the clip and it still feels too fast, I'll maybe slow it down to about 70%. By the way, in my survey someone mentioned transitions. I'm not sure if they meant artificial ones or not. I don't usually make any myself and only occasionally use transitions in the scene since I typically like to make them stationary or single shots. But if that was you and you want to expand on it in a message, feel free to inbox me and hopefully I can help. After trimming the clips, I then crop them. This is a 2-wide GIF set, which means that on Tumblr, each GIF will be coming up as 268 pixels wide. The height is of course up to you. This means that the shortest width you want while exporting is 268 pixels. That's a hard number for me to remember, so I ended up just creating a ratio that makes the most sense to me, mainly since it's a round number. For all of these GIFs, I'm going to crop it to 400 pixels wide by 230 pixels tall. There's nothing too scientific about it, just the rectangle size that I like. While cropping, this gives me the chance to trim out anything I captured outside of the window or focus in on what's important in the scene. For all of my GIF sets, I almost always start with editing the exposure. It's weird, but even scenes that seem bright normally while watching something read as really dark in GIF sets. This provides a higher contrast and brightness, but doesn't make it quite as grainy as directly just editing the brightness and contrast, since we're bringing up the entire exposure. Next for me is the curves adjustment layer. This is my favorite since it's how I get my dark muted shadows and low contrast highlights. Without having some exposure first though, it would have made the image too dark. I tend to make a bow shape, pulling down the highlights and lifting up those shadows and midtones. Then I do a small levels layer where I can directly push the highlights and shadows a bit more to play with contrast. And then it's a lot of tweaking. I want this to be my overall base, so I'll spend a lot of time making sure I like it. Then it's on to selective color. This adjustment layer is how to make all of your clips, or photos from mood boards, look alike. Right now I'm a really big fan of deep turquoise colors, and I push all of my blues into a more green shade. With this one, it's usually helpful to just push and pull the different sliders and tweak as you go. Once you have your base coloring figured out, change your view to 6 windows at a time. What I do then for consistency is I drag and drop these adjustment layers into every file. I'll do individual edits as I go, but this gives me a base to work with. This will also help me see how the GIFs look by each other even before uploading them to Tumblr. This is where I can go back into selective color and adjust as needed so that they match each other better. A lot of this just then becomes experimenting. Here, I'm going to be testing out a gradient map to see if I can smooth out the harsh contrast in this scene. In some cases, things work easily, in some cases they don't. I often try to make sure I pick clips that I feel that won't be too hard for me to work with, such as a really dark scene or too much movement. What I ended up doing here was manually painting a layer by color dropping the sides and then just going over the jagged edges that way. That solution doesn't work for every GIF, but it did here thankfully. After that, it's back to dragging and dropping my base edits. I noticed how much my layers affected the reds in this GIF, so then I went in to experiment with some more. The original edit made the red too much on the orange side for me, so I created a new adjustment layer to tweak it from there. This way, I didn't mess anything up in the original base adjustments. This also means that for any other GIF that has a lot of reds, I can now drag and drop this layer into it to match. I also ended up not liking the Malevolent clip I chose once I started editing since it felt like it stood out too much coloring wise. So don't be afraid to get new clips once you've found a style for the GIF set. I'm a firm believer in not forcing clips to work. It's the same with the coloring. There are some really awesome GIF makers out there that drastically change the color of their GIFs. But for me, my personal preference is to work with the natural tones of each episode or show. And with that, we're ready to export. Exporting is the longest part of all of this, to be honest. I've sped up and cut out a lot of the loading time in this part of the tutorial, but be prepared to chill for a while. This is the reason why I shrink down that initial Netflix browser. The smaller the original file, the faster it'll take to do this process. Faster meaning not quite as slow as death. I usually have like Pocket Camp open so I can play while I wait for everything to load. To export your GIFs, go to File, to Export for Web Legacy. This will bring up a new dialog box where you can customize how your file is going to export. In the top left, select the preset GIF 128 dithered. Then change where it says diffusion to noise. This is how you get that kind of grainy effect. Next to that, then change the number of colors from 128 to 256. Once you have those upper settings, we're going to take care of the size, both in literal image dimensions and file size. The two sections you'll be paying attention to here are the image size section, then the bottom left of this dialog box where it says GIF in all caps, and then has a number up beneath it. Weird disclaimer. That number will be off once you actually export it. I haven't bothered looking up why yet, I just know that it happens, so we'll actually aim lower than the file size we're aiming for. Tumblr updated their file size limits, but I'm still cautious of going as high as it potentially can, so I aim for about 6 GB. The way I do it, so as not to limit the colors, is by changing the image size. After a lot of trial and error, I found a rough estimate that helps me eliminate turning this part into a guessing game. By shrinking down the Netflix screen to the smallest it can go, and then recording it almost exactly that width and height, I have a usual base file size. This can range from 800 to 900 pixels wide. The first size I then adjust to is 600 pixels wide, so change that top number to that, and then click away from it to generate the new size. So then the first size that I adjust it to is 600 pixels wide. So change that top number to that, and then click away from it to generate the new size. Here's another one of those waiting spots where loading can take a while. Perfect time to catch some fish in Pocket Camp. Once you've adjusted the size, the file size number will also shrink down. Like I mentioned earlier, the number here usually changes once you export it. For us, it means it's going to go up. I found that if I aim to have 5.5 to 5.7 gigabytes, it will export right around 6 gigabytes, which is what I want. So that's our magic number. Sometimes my estimations are close, sometimes I have to tweak them some more. The less movement in colors means the image size can be bigger. The more going on in the background, more movement, or colors and gradients, means the size will have to be smaller. As I do this, I usually pop back and forth between Tumblr and Photoshop to start placing the GIFs into a post. This gives me a chance to view the GIF and see if it needs to be tweaked for colors or size or trimming, and then otherwise just starting the setup process. When it comes to making the post on Tumblr, most of it is eyeballing it, but I do have somewhat of a system to organizing the GIFs. My base system is first making sure that all of the people in the GIF sets are either walking or looking inward into the center of the GIF set, if they aren't already looking straight ahead. I talked about it in my mood board tutorial, but for some reason the human eye finds this more pleasing than people going off the screen, such as in art, advertising, etc. After that, it's usually based on color and light. I don't want to make too many dark GIFs in a row or too many light ones. Same with color. If I have 3 GIFs that have a lot of red in them, I try to balance that out so there's some red on both sides and that they're not all next to each other. I try to also have the types of GIFs spread out as well, so hopefully there aren't 2 location ones next to each other or 2 hand ones, for instance. This works with characters too. I won't put 2 GIFs of Mike next to each other. I'll drop the second one lower and preferably on the opposite side. Obviously, this doesn't always work, and maybe one GIF is really dark while another is light, so even if they're the same subject matter, they can still go next to each other. That's where your own personal taste and preference comes into it. Just take a look and see what feels balanced in your eyes. Once you're satisfied, it's just figuring out your caption, including your tags. I'm a big fan of block quotes, smaller copy, or just little things like that. While not necessary, I do think there's something about having the text not just placed there that helps elevate the graphic. For me, the caption is just as much a part of the post as the images are. I hope this was helpful for you. My Ask box is always open for any questions you may have about this or really anything else. If you use this to help teach yourself anything about GIFs, please message me or tag me so I can check it out. Thanks again for helping me reach this milestone, and happy creating!